S.A.F.E stands for Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. This was created to help seniors and their loved ones help protect themselves against scams, fraudulent people, con artists. TV series, well, hopefully you can all learn something on how to protect yourselves against this. Hi, I'm Peter Janowsky from Ryan and Janowsky Financial Strategies Group, and this is another episode of Project S.A.F.E, Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. And during these series of episodes, we have on various guests from different industries explaining and sharing how to protect our seniors from financial exploitation. Today, I have a guest for the first time from my industry, David Gustin, another financial advisor, and we're going to discuss various ways on how seniors, their caregivers, and their families can protect against financial exploitation, and also some stories on how to recognize the warning signs of how something may occur. Dave, thanks for coming.
My pleasure, Peter. Thanks for having me today.
So, like I just mentioned, you are the first financial advisor that I'm having on this show, obviously other than my late partner, John, from my industry. And, you know, for people who have seen the show, they understand that we have had guests from all facets of industries that deal with seniors,
sure,
and even some industries that don't deal with seniors that were able to give great advice on how to protect against financial exploitation. So that being said, I'd like to start off with how our industry works and the fact that our industry is a little unique in the fact that we are a self-regulatory organization, which means that we govern ourselves, and there's a tremendous amount of transparency on our industry, probably more than any industry I could come up with. And if someone came to you and they said, or in just general conversation, if somebody wanted to know how they can investigate a financial services firm or an individual, what would you recommend?
Peter, I would recommend that they first go to the FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority website, which is actually www.finra.org/broker check. There they can put in the name of any financial advisor that they want to do an examination of, and that name will come up and tell you about past performance and any violations or disclosures. And then you can make a decision at that point if you want to go forward with that financial advisor.
Does that also work for the firm? I mean, can someone actually investigate firms as well?
Yes, they can.
So, right.
Yes, they can.
So you can see the whole record up there?
Sure. You can see the record of any financial advisor / broker, investment counselor, registered investment advisor, or any brokerage house for that matter. Sure.
I'd also like to point out that in most cases when there is some kind of fraud or criminal activity with in anyone's life, that there's certain avenues to go. The police, the DA's office, but again, in our industry, if anybody suspects anything or they have to file a complaint, the way to do it is to go to that website as well. So
sure.
Go to FINRA
sure.
and file a complaint.
Absolutely. Anybody that has a problem right away, if you believe you're the victim of a fraud, contact FINRA right away.
Now, FINRA has also been instrumental in helping seniors in the last 7 years. There has been rules that have been enacted that require a lot more due diligence on our part in protecting seniors from not just ourselves in the industry, but from scams.
Sure.
Recognizing warning signs of how people may be susceptible to fraudulent claims, wire fraud, all sorts of things. So what I like to get into is what our industry is advocating the last few years, which also John and I have been big advocates for years as well, is something called a trusted contact.
Sure.
So could you explain what the trusted contact is?
Yeah, a trusted contact is somebody that not only from the standpoint of our industry, but also from the standpoint of a senior citizen who is receiving bills in the mail, or their checking statements, or their utility bills. It's somebody who can also follow up and get duplicate copies of those same bills, so that if a senior citizen should forget to pay a bill, a trusted contact, whether it's a a child or a grandchild or a friend or somebody living nearby that can also receive the statements and follow up to make sure that the bills are getting paid, so that a senior citizen doesn't have to worry about having their water turned off, the gas turned off, the oil deliveries not being made. In our industry, specifically the financial industry, what the trusted contact will do is make sure that the statements are being delivered, to make sure there's no problems with the statements, that the dividends and interest are being credited properly, or they are being sent in the mail to the recipient of the account.
Right. Not only that, I believe that the trusted contact could also check for activity in the account.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
This way there will be no unnecessary trading. There'll be something. These days most accounts in our business are fee-based.
Yes.
Commissions are slowly going away, which I think makes sense. It's a little bit of another conversation, but there is something called reverse churning as well. I mean, you want to make sure, the trusted contact, you want to make sure that there's proper activity in the account.
Yes.
So, people should realize that on statements, it just doesn't show holdings, but it shows activity.
Yes.
And going a little bit further, not to confuse it too, a trusted contact is not power of attorney.
That is correct. A power of attorney is somebody who, whether it's a limited power of attorney or full power of attorney, limited power of attorney gives someone the right to buy and sell securities in somebody else's account. And it's a form that must be notarized by both the owner of the account and the person who is receiving that power of attorney to act.
So someone can have, I know there's something called durable power of attorney. Somebody in like each investment firm will have forms that will have people allowed to have trading authority. They could issue checks. Yes. So in some instances, people can have durable power of attorney or power of attorney or trading authority and a trusted contact.
Yes.
So if that person has the power of attorney, or the ability to remove funds from the account, and if it starts to look a little suspicious, that trusted contact could see it.
Yes, it's a series of checks and balances to make sure that everything is okay. Somebody who's looking at the statements on a regular basis, it could be a CPA, it could be an attorney, but usually it's a family member who is the trusted contact, or a child or a grandchild, somebody who can take a look at the statements and receive duplicate statements on a monthly basis to make sure that there's nothing erroneous taking place.
Even in the beginning, I'd like to suggest that if people are sitting down with a financial advisor for the first or second time, or even an attorney, any kind of professional, maybe even an accountant, that trusted contact, if they have one, should be there.
Great idea, Peter.
And recently, a quick story, I have a new client that I met for the first time, I'm going to say 3-4 months ago, and she had her best friend there who was what I would consider a sophisticated investor. And it was a typical first meeting, piles of paperwork everywhere, and she was very concerned about my feelings about having her friend there. And I told her the truth. I said, it actually makes me feel better.
Absolutely.
Because she's not just watching me, she's watching you. So if I'm I'm human, if I'm forgetting to say something, or if I'm not asking, if I forgot to ask a question, or even better yet, if the new client forgets something, she had a bank account or a document that she completely forgot about, the trusted contact was there to help that out.
Yes.
So moving along with the trusted contact, you were telling me a story once recently where you had to have something signed.
Yes.
And it wasn't really a trusted contact, but they were questioning you, and I'd love for you to share that story again.
Sure. It turns out that a client of mine was in the hospital and needed to have some paperwork signed prior to the end of the year. And when I went to visit this client in the hospital, he did sign the documents that were needed, but then when I was ready to leave, the security forces prevented me from leaving to make sure that everything was on the up and up, and they checked with the person who had the power of attorney to make sure that everything was on the up and up, and that it was okay, because there are unscrupulous people who, in any industry, that will try to get somebody in a hospital to sign a document. So under these circumstances, it's better to have, tight security that's watching over.
Oh, I have to tell you, in 25 years in this business, it's the first time I ever heard that. And usually we hear all the other stories where, you know, of easy prey, they're in the hospital, they know what's going on, and an easy victim, and I get that. But I think that everyone who was involved in that and stopping you should be commended, because they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they never even had any training, and they weren't even official trusted contacts. So I think it's a great story.
Yeah, they're looking to protect the patient, so that's what you want. That's what you actually want.
And you protect the person, actually.
Sure.
So we experience a lot with in that category of easy prey. All right. So over the years, John and I have seen people come under that umbrella, unfortunately, where there's a change in life. Someone passes away, and all of a sudden, whoever they're working with, a professional, starts changing things. And you know, it was always our attitude that, well, if it was good enough when the person was alive, why does it have to be changed now? I mean, in some circumstances, yeah, as a change of life, everything changes. I get it, but all too often, we see, like you saying, unscrupulous people. They see an opportunity to take advantage, and again, this may not be criminal, but it's exploitation. And these people can be, you know, they see the fees that they may be able to generate in selling something that someone doesn't need. And you know, that's always been us. And like, if somebody passes away, everything should be settled and move slowly. There's no rush to do anything. And unfortunately, we have seen that. I've seen people get talked into products that may necessarily, you know, they generate high commissions, and they may not have needed them.
This actually happened with a client that I recently obtained, where it turns out that they had an annuity that they really never needed. They were planning on leaving the proceeds of these monies to a charity, and under no circumstances did they need an annuity in this particular case. And it turns out the annual fees were approximately 3.25%. And so, you know, the client agreed that we should liquidate this annuity, and it happened to be in an IRA, so we kept it in an IRA where the fees would be much less. So it turns out that, yes, in analyzing our clients, when we first meet them, we do a complete financial, as you would call it, a holistic approach to a client's investments, and seeing what's best for them, what's not best for them, and if there's been an abuse in the past.
We came across something like this several years ago. A person passed away, and they had an IRA at a bank, and for whatever reason, the bank liquidated the IRA, went into another account, invested in mutual funds, and we tried helping the client fight it a little bit, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, there was limited recourse. And you know, my feeling was that it wasn't just one person at the bank, because as you know, in our industry, almost everything has to get signed off for. We have such heavy compliance, and we have so many regulations on us. So with this bank doing that, it wasn't just the financial advisor at the bank. You know, the manager had to sign off on it and everything, and it was just, I mean, you know, it was, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in tax bills. It was unnecessary.
That's the major problem, Peter. There are so many things that are wrong with that particular episode, because creating a tax situation for a client is the wrong way to go. To make something, to liquidate an IRA and take that money out, that money is all taxable.
Again, it was because it was an event because somebody passed away, and someone was taken advantage of, and it was just terrible. You know, going into, like I just mentioned, how much compliance is on our industry, and how many, what kind of safeguards there are. Can you explain how our industry actually protects not just seniors but everybody from wire fraud, if somebody wants to do a transfer of funds?
Yeah, great question, Peter. One of the things that has happened in recent years with the advent of the internet and with the advent of email and texting, a lot of times when a client wants to remove money from an account, when they send us an email or a text or something like that, it's incumbent upon us to actually follow up and speak to the client to make sure it's a legitimate transaction. But there have been numerous cases cases where someone has sent an erroneous fraudulent email to somebody, and the money was actually sent out to an erroneous checking account. And so, you know, it's incumbent upon you and me and our industry to follow up and make sure that we actually talk to the client. That's the number one thing that we can do. If we receive an email or a text requesting money to be removed from a client's account, we should always follow up with that client and call them directly. And on top of that, if we are not the person who's following up, it's important to ask certain passwords and make sure that we are verifying exactly who the person is.
It's funny because I know certain people watching the show, even right now, and I had this conversations where, you know, okay, I know what's going on, but you still have to tell me. You can't email, you can't text me numbers, you can't, and it's you know, and why? I'm like, yeah, I know we're friends, and we text each other all the time, but when it comes to this, it has to be verbal. So I explain it a lot, and it's for everybody's own good.
Absolutely.
Everything that we require in our industry is really for the client's own protection.
Absolutely.
Which also has gone mostly paperless, and you know, which creates a little bit of a problem because some people are not tech savvy.
Sure.
It could be a generational thing. It doesn't have to be. I know some seniors that are fantastic. They have their own blogs, and they've been on, you know, writing on using the internet for you know, since the beginning of, you know, late 90s when it first started out.
Absolutely.
But we do have that push, I would say, that most companies and most of the world are doing these days to go paperless. And you know, we have also been told that it's actually safer because more stuff has been stolen through the mail than on the internet and you know, grabbing passwords.
We have seen this for not just senior citizens who are receiving their Social Security checks or Medicare checks, you know, where the checks are being stolen out of the mailbox, and they request Social Security, or you know, they want people to have direct deposit to avoid this type of fraud or this type of scam, or having the check stolen. But we also in our industry are trying to, you know, formulate a policy whereby, you know, it's paperless. We're trying to go paperless to avoid, you know, killing more trees, so to speak, right? I mean, that's one of the main reasons.
All of the above, I get it.
You know, and it's happened over the years where clients have actually said to me, do I need to keep all of these statements for, you know, 10 or 20 years? And the answer is no, you don't have to keep all of them. But, you know, depending on the nature, if there's something on one of the statements that you really need, yes, you should keep the year-end statements anyway. Or if it shows a required minimum distribution that a senior has taken. So things like that. But yes, more and more people are trying to go paperless for security reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? It's working. It was slow. I mean, you know, my business has transformed over a couple of years,
Sure.
and it is working. It's easy for everybody, and it's cutting down on a lot of junk in the mail. A lot of things, you know, legalese, prospectuses, pages and pages of legal matter that is not necessary.
Well, let's face it, people need to still get the prospectuses, but they can read them online if they want. They can get an email with the prospectus, and they can actually, in this day and age, people can actually vote their shares of stock or bonds if they need to. They can do that through a proxy online without having to receive voluminous amounts of paper.
That's 100%, and that's why that's why everybody's doing this. I want to circle back a little bit. When we were talking before in the beginning of the show about how transparent our business is and how we can investigate other financial advisors, and we could see a record, and even if everything is clean and the person's comfortable working with someone, there are warning signs, especially these days when someone may be offering something that's too good to be true. And there's a lot of noise out there, especially now, you know, the headlines are all about inflation, and there's a ton of seniors who are on fixed income and looking for that monthly check.
So I have a great story about this. As recently as yesterday, in the AARP newspaper that came out, there is a story about financial advisors, you know, boiler room technicians who are screaming about Armageddon, that it's the end of the world, and that all of a sudden that people should liquidate their investments, whether they should liquidate their stocks and bonds and put the money into coins. And so there are numerous examples in the article.
Was it an article or an ad?
It's an article in AARP newspaper that came out yesterday that I received at home and read last night, and it's the story about people who are being urged to take their monies and put it into coins because coins will do better at the end of the world. So not only that, but the AARP went as far as to put a qualifier at the end of the article to say they accept advertising from gold and silver coin companies, but they are vetted to make sure that they are legitimate so that they're not scams.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've often said when I have conversations with clients over the years or anyone, and we're talking about the noise, what I call it, the headlines, and you know, the New York Times and Wall Street Journal aren't in business to give you news, they're in business to make money. So it's all about subscription rates and advertising and so on and so forth. So if the news is slow, they may have to create a little news. Or if news is average, they may have to sensationalize it, whatever they're going to do to get Dave to open it up and read it and stuff. So that being said, there's so many newsletters out there, and now because there's so many channels on TV, and there's so much streaming media on the internet and everything, I think that what you just said about Armageddon and preying on people's fears is unfortunately an old tactic, but there's more of it now than ever.
Oh, sure.
And what I was going back before saying that, you know, there are people who rely on that monthly check, and it's a tough spot for us these days because when interest rates are so low, inflation is going up, and that's the new horror story, inflation, which is real. I mean, it's a whole other story. We don't have time to get into that, but what do we do to not just safely, but make someone feel comfortable with giving them rates and returns?
Well, something that happened to me, I gave a lecture in 2010 to the AARP in Huntington, New York, in the library. And at one point, I happened to be discussing common stocks that raise their dividends each year, which happens to be a fan favorite, just because it's been around for 100 years of companies that have been paying dividends or raising dividends. And just by a show of hands, I said, please tell me if your medical bills have gone up. And every hand in the audience went up to tell me that yes. And that previous year, medical bills had gone up by 8% on average. And ironically, in 2007 and 2008, the Social Security did not raise that cost of living adjustment, the COLA adjustment. So clients need to worry about inflation these days, and they need to find out their investments that are going to do better and cover the cost of inflation.
It's funny, it just popped into my mind. We both do long-term care insurance when we feel it's appropriate, and obviously we're not selling anything today, and we're not suggesting anything.
Not at all.
However, I do know, and I've seen this, which is a tough thing to come across, is that a lot of older, even today, new policies, long-term care, what a lot of people aren't aware of, they could raise the rates as time goes by. And
yes.
We have seen people in their 80s who all of a sudden get a 40% increase on their long-term care. And this was part of their budget. You know, this was like their monthly budget, and they have no choice but to try and keep paying it because you can't give up that policy.
Right.
So, like I was saying before, you know, we're in a tough spot sometimes trying to maneuver through a market with low interest rates, which is getting me to the next point where I've always said that if it's too good to be true, it isn't. And it's not just, you know, it's like selling snake oil. So if people are listening to this and they are reading, well, I could get this annuity at 12%. I have this, you know, this bond is offering 13%, and you know, it's just logic. If someone's offering something at 12 or 13%, and a 10-year government bond is 1.9, right now as we speak, obviously something's off.
Right. You have to ask yourself, as a function of what the United States government is borrowing, and those treasury rates, whether they're treasury bills or treasury notes or treasury bonds, those are the rates that the United States government is borrowing money from you and me at. Okay, so if that rate is 1 or 2% at this point, how is it that somebody else is offering a much higher rate of interest?
Right.
So you have to ask yourself and do your due diligence and find out what the quality and the ratings are of any bond that is supposedly AAA, AA, single A, triple B, or whatever the rating is. So
Right.
yes,
And
to
which-
make the comparison to a Treasury security.
Right, which doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist.
Correct.
Because these high-yielding instruments that do give high yield in the form of dividends or distributions, they exist. The problem is whether or not it's suitable. So you know, if we want to get into suitability a little bit, you know, if somebody actually understands the risk involved, and then we have to decide, it's up to us, is it suitable? You know,
Yes.
is it for this 80-year-old person who just has, you know, inflation on their mind, and their long-term care rates just went up, and well, yeah, we do have this, for lack of a better expression, this junk bond that's going to yield 9%, but is it suitable?
Right, right. You have to ask yourself those questions. Yes.
And again, suitable is, you know, if something's not suitable for a client, doesn't mean it's criminal.
That's correct.
It could be exploitation, though, because someone in our industry may be getting compensated differently on different products, and the public has to be aware of that. So that goes, and yeah, I mean, this conversation is just circling back to the beginning, really, and that's why you would have, again, a trusted contact looking at it if you don't understand it, or even a second opinion.
Yes.
And I'm sure, just like me, you probably have clients that have more than one financial advisor.
They do, and they compare the investments that I am recommending to them with the other person, and conversely, they are asking me about the investments that somebody else is recommending to them. So yes, we have to be vigilant and diligent and do our homework, and you know.
Actually, you know, I wanted to go over this in the beginning. When did you first get into this business?
1980.
I'm not trying to date you.
That's okay, Peter. That's okay.
But
I've seen a lot over the years,
Yeah.
and I've seen a lot of financial exploitation through different scenarios. In one particular case, this actually happened to a relative of mine, where my nephew's grandmother was told that he was in a jail in Spain, and they were looking for money. So that scam is out there, and it's only because of her due diligence and following up and calling one of the relatives to make sure that he was okay, which he was. Then she realized it's a scam and not to pay the money to anybody. This goes on, and it's happened many times. I had another client who, unfortunately, many years ago, left a phone message for me and said, I need to know how to invest the millions that I'm going to be inheriting. And when I called and said, where are you getting these millions from? She said, well, I sent in a check to a pet organization, and they promised that they would send the money back. So I immediately alerted her son, who followed up and stopped payment on the check to make sure that there was no scam and that nobody could, you know, take money from her checking account.
in fact, it's pretty interesting. I would say that when we were doing Project S.A.F.E, when John and I were doing it live, you know, in front of live audiences, ultimately, after every presentation, someone came up to us with a sad story just like that. And I've literally heard of people sending in thousands, it's one time tens of thousands of dollars from a scam.
Yes.
And the good thing about our industry is we actually have to take courses and continuing ed every year just to recognize if a client might be aging. And you know, their faculties might be diminished, and we have training on how to recognize this.
Yes.
Anyway, I know you have a bunch of stories. I have a bunch of stories, but we're running out of time. So before we do, if somebody wants to talk to you directly, what's the best way of reaching you?
Well, the best thing to do, Peter, is to call the office at area code 516-719-6938. They can always reach my cell at 516-524-6020.
Fantastic.
And how about for you?
Very similar phone number, 516-719-6396. And as we wind down the show, I'm going to close, and I'm hopefully going to say it like my dear friend used to say it. May the hand of a friend always be near with help and support, whether you need it or not. And thanks again for watching.